welcome to SVGTV News for Tuesday, February 2nd, 2021. I am Rochelle Batiste with the details. Minister of Finance Camila Gonzalez presented in Parliament on Monday the fiscal package for 2021 amounting to $1.21 billion. He said the 2021 budget seeks to respond to the difficult circumstances confronting the country and preparing the people for when there is a rebound from the economic challenges. He noted that the current expenditure stands at $698 million with current revenue at $647 million.
Compensation of employees is $346 million, or 38.6% of our budget. Transfers and pensions are $660 million, or 6.7% of the budget. Other transfers are $127.4 million, or 14.2% of the budget. Interest payments of $74.8 million, or 8.4% of the budget. Goods and services of $90 million, or 10.1% of the budget.
The finance minister said the government's strategic priorities are to create jobs and to invest in key productive sectors to drive growth. Hence, $317.4 million was allocated to key sectors of government ministries. The Ministry of Economic Affairs received the highest sum of $143.4 million.
General public services get $19.3 million. Public order and safety get $3 million. Economic activity $143.4 million. Environmental protection $57.8 million. Housing and community amenities $18.3 million. Health $28.8 million. Recreation and culture $6.4 million. Education $33.7 million. And social protection $6.6 million.
Minister Gonzalez said budget 2021 will be financed by current revenue of $647.4 million and capital receipts of $565.2 million. He said that budget 2021 has a current deficit of $50.7 million and an overall deficit of $309.2 million.
Current revenue of 647, less current expenditure of 698, which gives you the current deficit of $50.7 million. We add grants of 55.9 and capital revenue of 3. Funds available for capital for expenditure of 8.2.
And in light of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the government held off from introducing new revenue earning measures in the 2021 budget, except for one. Minister Gonzalez said the government will be implementing a 1% increase to the customs service charge to help finance regional entities which SVG benefits from, particularly those in disaster management.
In order to assure consistent, reliable funding of these organizations, the government will undertake to pass legislation that will guarantee automaticity of financing to certain critical regional entities. These entities will be funded by a 1% increase to the customs service charge and ring-fenced in much the same way as we have set aside monies for our contingencies fund. The increase will move the customs service charge from 5% to 6%, a rate that is still among the lowest in the region. We expect the measure to yield $9.6 million this year, which represents less than 1.5% of budgeted revenue. While we have been cautious not to impose income tax measures at this time, and indeed postponed many of the fees and measures passed in last year's budget, it is precisely the nature of the times and our challenges that demand our decisive response today.
The finance minister said financing for these entities has been problematic and measures have to be put in place to ensure they are properly funded.
Are of self-evident importance. These agencies and more constitute an extension of the local functions of our government and are inextricable from the work of a modern nation state. They are also collective entities upon which multiple nations in our region depend. Unfortunately, the functioning of these essential agencies is significantly stymied from time to time by irregular and insufficient funding. Our governments and those of our neighbors have been guilty at one time or another of racking up arrears to these entities. Their own emergency services, to us at this particular time, were hampered by various financial challenges.
Leader of the opposition, Dr. Godwin Friday, said the 2021 budget is not one for the times, as it doesn't fit the circumstances which many Vincentians are experiencing. In his response to the budget presentation in Parliament today, Dr. Friday said his review of the estimates and budget for 2021 reveals a lack of alignment with the most important problems and challenges currently facing SVG, and the government fails to point a clear path out of the crisis.
No thinking outside the box. No creative solution, especially in this time when everybody says that COVID has given us a chance to reset and think of different ways to move forward. Instead, everything remains for show, political spin. Everything done through political lens, what may look good for government. And there's too much spin. It would be refreshing. And you see it from time to time with particular leaders, even some here in our region, who would sit and have an honest conversation with people and say, listen, this thing, it ain't what I told you before. It's more serious than that. But I'm leveling with you. We can work together, we can get through this.
Dr. Friday said while he understands that all of the solutions will not come in one budgetary exercise, the foundation must, however, be laid for the systematic problems that the country needs to overcome for a viable future. He said, as such, a critical juncture, the budget lacks support for the private sector, with limited incentives provided to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and maintain employment, which has been severely affected by the pandemic, with over 420 businesses closing and 2,000 plus persons went on the breadline. The opposition leader said the government has taken an approach of being in competition with the private sector to see who can create the most growth and development, which he said should not be.
Because perhaps it's not politically expedient. The same thing I was saying earlier, it doesn't look as if government is doing it so they don't get the credit. So the government prefers to offer the employees directly a payment through the NIS, for example. So everybody knows it's coming from government. They know who to be grateful to. But this creates or perpetuates or deepens, quite frankly, the dependency syndrome between government and the people. It's like a patron and a client. Old-time politics.
Dr. Friday said the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed and laid bare the existing vulnerabilities in the economy and society, such as chronic high rate of employment, lack of opportunities for entrepreneurship, and growing poverty.
It may not be getting sick and going to hospital, but it's the pain of 1,000 cuts of not being able to provide for your family, for yourself, the necessities of life. And these things have been made worse, Madam Speaker, by what I would regard as, and I think most people in this country, as a timid and ineffective response by the government to the pandemic.
Noting that the budget process ought to be a good opportunity for the government to show the people the direction in which the country can go and how it will get there, the opposition leader said the government instead seems to be in cruise control in light of the numerous challenges facing the country.
What makes matters worse is that the government doesn't care, or certainly doesn't show that it cares, about financial accountability, and treats it as an optional request of them as government to be ignored when it suits their circumstances. This must change if we are to make government responsive to the people's needs and to make government solutions relevant to the problems of our times. So that we don't have solutions in search of problems, as is often the case now, but rather the other way around. You have problems that have been identified, genuine, real problems that we solve.
In other news, the number of COVID-19 cases recorded in St. Vincent and the Grenadines since March 2020 has gone past 1,000, with 57 new cases recorded on Monday, bringing the total number of confirmed cases to date to 1,008. The National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, said in a news release that the 57 new COVID-19 cases are from samples collected between January 20th to February 1st, and all of the cases were detected during contact tracing and testing of persons with flu symptoms. There are now 859 local cases of COVID-19, many of whom NEMO said are linked as contacts of known positives. 262 persons are now recovered from the virus. 744 cases remain active, and 2 persons with COVID-19 have died. NEMO said all positive cases will remain isolated until cleared. All close contacts of positive cases currently in quarantine should contact the flu clinic in their district to arrange testing for clearance. All residents of and visitors to St. Vincent and the Grenadines are reminded of the importance of consistently wearing facial coverings, practicing physical distancing, and frequent hand washing or sanitization to reduce the likelihood of being infected with the virus which causes COVID-19. The correct wearing of a face mask is very effective in slowing the spread of COVID-19. During SVG-TV's Viewpoint program on Sunday, infectious disease specialist Dr. Gerald Thompson used the opportunity to demonstrate the incorrect ways in which some persons have been wearing their masks, which he said will not protect them from contracting the viral illness.
Masks are very effective. In the early part of the pandemic, we had not really recommended masks. We were saying only healthcare workers wear masks. But then we realized that mask, whether it's an N95, a surgical mask like this, or a cloth mask that has 2 layers, but if it's worn properly, don't have it, I don't know if I could do it, don't have it with your nose exposed. Don't have it with your chin above. Don't have it on your forehead. Don't allow it to get soiled and wet and soggy. Masks are probably one of the more critical things.
Dr. Thompson said alcohol and soap are also very effective in removing the virus from hands and other external parts of the body.
It has this lipid layer, fatty layer, and just like you fry an egg and a frying pan, there's oil in it, how a squeezy would help you clean that oil from the frying pan. Soap and alcohol cracks the envelope of the virus and just kills it, destroys it. So that these measures are what we call the external measures, and they will prevent the virus, if you're exposed to it, from getting into your system. Because I must say this, Jennifer, there's a part of your nose, the back of your nose, the back of your tongue and your lungs that have these special receptors. We call them the ACE2 receptors. And the virus is able to bind those receptors and get into your cells. And if you could use a mask, space, and washing your hands, you can prevent the virus from getting to infect the back of your nose.
The infectious disease specialist, however, noted that personal responsibility is the most effective way in the fight against COVID-19. Chief Laboratory Technologist Elliot Samuel said now that they have expanded the capacity of the molecular lab for testing, by the end of this week, the backlog of PCR tests should be cleared. On the Viewpoint program on Sunday evening, Samuel said the Ministry of Health, Wellness and the Environment recently brought in new PCR equipment, the automatic extractor for the lab, which will allow for the processing of more tests in a faster time.
Consuming. So I think by October last year, having realized that, we put in a bid for an automatic extraction machine. It took us a while to get it, because as I mentioned before, it's not easy to get anything that is related to COVID-19. And every company that sells PCR equipment and PCR consumables, you have to join the queue. And you have to wait. And if there's a first world country who have a need, then they jump the line in front of you and you have to step back again. So we recently got our QIAcube HD, and the QIAcube HD automates that process for us. So what was taking us 3 hours to do, we can now accomplish that in 96 minutes. So it's really going to help us, I think, to get out of this slump that we're in terms of the backlog. We got the machine in lab, I think it was around the 21st, and it was not without its challenges.
Samuel also noted that a cohort of trained laboratory experts from Cuba will assist with the processing of the PCR tests.
I want to give a pragmatic time frame. So given everything that we've gotten recently in terms of the additional staff, I didn't mention that we have just received an additional cohort of trained experts from Cuba. They should be finishing their quarantine and they're going to be joining the staff pretty soon, which means we have expanded capacity for testing, and we're going to be expanding the amount of hours the lab is open as well. So given all that we've gotten from the Ministry of Health and from the government, I can safely say that give us until the end of the week. And I know the techs, I must commend the guys at the lab right now. They have been doing and continue to do a phenomenal job. They are going above and beyond, and a number of persons would from time to time call in and offer to buy dinner for us and stuff like that.
The laboratory technologists used the opportunity to explain the reasons for the backlog at the lab over the past weeks. PCR,
the acronym stands for polymerase chain reaction, right? And it's really a research grade procedure. It's not recommended for diagnostic testing. It's a research grade procedure, right? So we have to do what is called an extraction process. So we have to actually break open those cells and get that RNA out. That takes manually about 3.5 hours. After we have harvested the RNA, we are now going to send our detection enzymes and material in to look for the virus, probes and primers. Now we find them by that reverse process where we building the RNA strands, breaking it down, building it, breaking it down. So you will hear we talk about amplifications and CT, right? Which is like a cyclic threshold. But that other process takes an additional 2 hours. So the entire process in itself is roughly about a 6-hour process.
For
and
one test?
Yes, and we haven't even factored in prepping and you know, resting between machines, decontamination and stuff like that. So it's really a lengthy process.
Some information now on the La Soufrière volcano. In its update today, the National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, said additional reflectors for the electronic distant measurement, the EDM target, were installed, bringing the total number of reflectors installed to 9. It said these reflectors will be used to assist with measurements of deformation associated with the flanks of the volcano, and that some gas measurements were also done today using a multi-gas instrument and a filter pack, which was successful. NEMO said these gas measurements will be used to understand what is happening deep within the volcano, as gases are coming to the surface faster than magma, and that this can be used as an early warning system. NEMO is reminding the public that no evacuation order or notice has been issued and continues to appeal to the public to desist from visiting the volcano, especially going into the crater, since doing so is extremely dangerous. The organization said it will continue to provide regular updates on all activities taking place at La Soufrière. Meanwhile, the government of SVG is looking to advance its monitoring of La Soufrière with an allocation of $350,000 AC dollars in the 2021 budget. In his presentation of the budget, Minister of Finance Camilo Gonzalez said with the ever-present threat of the effusive eruption of the volcano, there is insufficient data to make safe predictions about its behavior. He said with this in mind, more equipment will be purchased and upgrades will be done to the volcano monitoring mechanisms.
Budget 2021 also allocates $350,000 in capital spending to various monitoring and preparatory exercises related to La Soufrière. This allocation covers the conduct of preparatory drills, upgrades to the Belmont Observation Center, and works related to the placement of various types of monitoring equipment in and around the volcano. Not reflected in the budget is the value of numerous contributions of equipment and expertise that have come from a variety of sources, most notably the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center, the Regional Security System, and the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency.
Minister Gonzalez said that while they have received support and offers from regional countries should an evacuation become necessary, they are not leaving anything to chance, especially for residents in the communities in the danger zone. He said that monies were injected to further NEMO's awareness program.
The government's preparation and foresight mean that there is absolutely no need for any panicked responses. All Vincentians must nonetheless remain vigilant and serious in the face of this gathering threat. Let us listen to the experts and neither entertain nor encourage the baseless pronouncements of attention seekers or doomsday prophets.
Noting that the hurricane season will soon be upon us, Minister Gonzalez said it is also a focus for the government. SVG joins other countries today in celebrating the presence and importance of the World Wetlands Day 2021 under the theme Wetlands and Water Inseparable and Vital for Life. This theme shines a spotlight on wetlands as a source of fresh water and encourages action to restore them. In an address to mark World Wetland Day 2021, Director of Forestry Fitzgerald Providence encouraged persons to stop the disposal of garbage in wetlands such as waterways, river mouths and swamps to prevent stagnant areas that breed mosquitoes.
In past, persons saw them as wastelands and there was a lot of dumping of garbage, or they would drain the swamps and backfill them quickly and create them into areas for infrastructure. There's sometimes a conflict because of what we do. As humans, we tend to dump a lot of things into the rivers, and when they come down to those estuary areas, they create blockage, and that results in stagnant pools. And when you have stagnant pools of water, the next thing you have is the mosquitoes. And we know mosquitoes can carry diseases and which can make us sick and also be very dangerous to our health. So we have that conflict. So what we need to do is to maintain our streams and rivers, do not dump our garbage in them so that they will become polluted and cause stagnant blocks. And also when a polluted stream doesn't promote good aquavi and so on. So if there's no fish, then you would have these things occurring which impact negatively on us.
Providence said that persons should know the importance of wetlands, noting that they are vital in sustaining lives and livelihood in SVG.
And inland water bodies, lagoons, they can also help in terms of being reservoir for water for human consumption. In terms of the estuaries and mangrove swamps, they create a habitat for birds and other species, including fish. And mangroves are a major nursery for fish, and so they're very important in terms of the fisheries. Coastal lagoons, well, I don't think we do. We plant rice in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but in some areas, these water bodies are good areas for production of agricultural crops such as rice. And also the swamps are very important for migratory species. The birds that move from one area of the world to the other, they move and they find roost in these areas, and it's important in terms of their life cycle.
The SVG Community College is offering Vincentians an opportunity to learn basic Mandarin at the institution. The college is currently accepting applications for its 2021 Mandarin cohort. The college said this year's course will be delivered using a blended learning approach, with virtual classes set to begin February 23rd, 2021. Persons interested should visit the college website for the application form and further information. The deadline for applications is Monday, February 8th, 2021 at 4 p.m. The college said the short course will run until June 3rd, 2021 and will require applicants to dedicate 2 evenings per week, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. The police have arrested and charged Fred George, a 57-year-old laborer of Prospect, with entering the dwelling house of a 54-year-old caretaker of Brighton as a trespasser, and at the time had with him a weapon of offense, namely a cutlass. George was further charged with allegedly, unlawfully and maliciously wounding the said caretaker by chopping him on his left index finger with a cutlass. The incident occurred at Brighton on January 25th, 2021. The accused was expected to appear before the magistrate court today to answer to the charges.